Welcome, Bruce Jacobson, to Artist Spotlight 2020 Millstream Arts Festival in collaboration with the Art Crawl for St. Cloud downtown. We're really happy and excited to have Bruce with us here today to talk about his work and his background and share his work with us. So, Bruce, if you wouldn't mind starting out talking about what you do and your background.
Okay, well, thanks, Alicia. I am honored and excited to be part of this. I think this is something that Millstream should be very proud of in these difficult times, that they step forward um, really with an innovative opportunity. Art is not my full-time gig. My real job is a biochemistry professor at St. Cloud State. And so my training really lives on the other side of the spectrum. Science and art, in some ways, are considered very separate. But in my experience, that was my own mistake. That the same level of commitment to the process, the same level of detail, has served me very well in both worlds. And then within the last few years, I took a sabbatical and I added a theological degree to that as well, because that interaction between humanity and those things we just can't understand or completely describe, but which we experience through art most readily, is a place of fascination for me.
You know, what's been interesting with these interviews that I've been holding with other artists, there is quite a few artists that start out in the sciences and then move to art. So there
Hmm.
really is, I believe, that connection, to the earth and to the sciences as there is to the art. And it's I've been surprised, no, I wouldn't say surprised, but it has been really great to see how many artists have that connection with the sciences.
Yeah, I have a number of science colleagues who also are really quite excellent artists. So very true.
Hmm.
And I think it's maybe a critique of our educational system, that people come out with the sense that those are different disciplines. Um, I would like to see us spending more time together. So.
I completely agree with you, Bruce. Completely agree with you. Could you talk a little bit about the medium you work in?
All right, so I have been a woodworker my entire life. And maybe 5 years ago, I was out in the garage and realized that I had been carrying around. Well, there's two things really, that both the fine art and the jewelry have different origins. Um, the jewelry, I have been carrying some really spectacular, beautiful wood for 30 years. I bought it when I was a graduate student in Houston. And I finally just said, you have to start making something beautiful and to be able to share this with people. Um, the fine art, I was inspired by black and white photography, where a technique where the model is illuminated through blinds. And so there's a striping effect, and the light simply curves around the body of the model. And I looked at a piece, which we'll see in a little while, and that was a black and white photograph. And I thought that would be amazing transformed into wood. And that was really the beginning of this technique. And it's been quite a journey of starting with light, and transforming that, giving it a second dimension, or almost recovering that lost dimension that happens in photography.
Hmm. Let's that's a great transition into your pieces. So let's start looking at them here so we can share with our audience what you mean. Mm.
Yeah, so this was the piece that started it all. I saw, believe it or not, on Pinterest, this black and white photograph just popped up in my feed. And I thought, wow, to do that as wood, and what is difficult to capture in two dimensions, that is always fun to watch people as they are um, interacting with my work, is that what you see changes depending on the angle that you're actually seeing the work. So if you look at this from one side, or if you look at it from the other, really that's when that third dimension starts coming in.
Well, I think we have a
So I cannot
close-up.
take
Let's look at the close-up here. That may show some of that
the
dimension.
quality of wood. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is to give a sense of really how much work I spent finishing these pieces. Each piece is sanded down almost to an automotive type luster, whereas a normal fine woodworking finish would be something like 400 sandpaper and maybe 600 as a final. I will take many of these to 1,000 or 1,500, and they develop a almost a translucence that honestly they glow in moonlight. One of the most fun discoveries of what I do is I had the pieces out preparing for a show in one of the rooms in the house that was illuminated by the moon, and the individual pieces of wood develop this pearly glow to them that's just amazing.
Hmm. Beautiful. This next piece here, the one thing I noticed about the pieces when you were sharing, they have a contour line feeling to them also, and like contours of land, or when I think of like aerial kind of maps drawn out, they remind me a little of that also.
Yep. I've had people suggest that. I've had people talk about, the waves that you see in sand, either, in the desert, or if you see on a seashore after the waves have kind of caused ripples in the sand. Um, and there is somehow, and what I love about this particular technique is that although it's still art, it seems to portray a movement and a tension at the same time. And so, really, to my mind, that's the source of the sense of grace in something like dance, is that it is both movement and tension. And when I do the striping effect, this is something I will always look for. Does the direction, does the sense of motion that I feel, and I can't call it anything other than feel, really convey that sense of motion and tension in the pose. This is a standard ballet pose, and it's actually one of my favorite pieces. Um, and if we go to the detail
Hmm.
on this one,
Yeah.
this technically was one of my most difficult pieces to execute, because some of these pieces um, are as little as a 64th of an inch thick in some places. So both the finishing, and then of course the attaching them to the background was a technical challenge with this one. But I really loved the way that this one came out, and the way that it really captured what I find most kind of appealing about dance.
They are delicate also. They just feel very delicate when you're looking at them.
And so this is another example. I went into kind of a study phase. To my knowledge, and this is one of the things that a lot of people have said about my work. is that they don't know of anyone who's doing this particular technique. Certainly, striping in photography is relatively common. You can find examples, and I've actually found other artists that work in that medium, and they've been very encouraging about continuing. Um, but I am really discovering how this added dimension and quality of doing these pieces in wood works. You notice this one is on a gray background, and a colleague who some of you may know, Heidi Jube, suggested I try something other than the black background. And a fascinating aspect of this piece is that if it is in direct sunlight, such that there's no shadow at all, the pieces are so thin and delicate, it disappears.
Mm,
So the shadow is essential for being able to actually see what's happening in the piece. So
And we
again,
have a
this
close-up.
is part of a study. Oh yeah, of the um,
Mhm.
and again, this is a piece where the individual pieces are very fine and very thin. And people are often, one of the things that they often ask is, well, how do you make these pieces? How do you do this? And it really is a fairly long process of there's a design phase of starting with a photograph and introducing the striping effect. And then I have to transfer that to the pieces of wood and cut each individual piece of wood out on the bandsaw. And then there are probably 5 to 6 different layers of sanding. There's a rough sanding that's done with a drum sander, and then a number of rounds with increasingly fine sandpaper with a Dremel, and then really finished with hand finishing or hand sanding at the highest level. So it's a
Mhm.
long process. Each piece, is upwards of a week of time, if not more, from start to finish. But it honestly, it's a labor of love. I just enjoy the the challenge and the beauty of trying to capture um, that added dimension by taking light and transforming it into something more tangible, something more solid that people can kind of walk around and look at.
I think we have one last piece of your wood sculptures here.
This one truly is my favorite. This it's larger than you might expect. This is on a 4 foot by 4 foot background. Um, and it's based on a photograph that I again found. It was taken by a photographer in Germany, and I emailed him and kind of told him what I do and got his blessing to create this piece. And so you have again another dancer in a really an elegant but high tension pose. And so the goal was through the striping effect to capture the strength required to do this, the tension in the extended arm, and yet still have it just simply feel, to put not a fancy term, to just simply feel beautiful. That then, and I really love the way this one turned out. This one just it works for me. I'm so pleased with this. This is larger, so if we go to the detail, rather than being a 16th or a 62nd or a 64th of an inch. Most of these pieces are closer to half an inch, and they will have not only dimension coming out, but it's not equal. They're to actually capture all of the ways that the light is interacting with the model. Um, there are undulations within each piece. So each piece is curvy in X and Y per se, but it also has subtle variations in Z as well, that contribute to the overall effect. That when someone walks around and they're going to see, they actually the muscles actually become visible as you move around this piece.
Wow, beautiful, Bruce. Thank you for sharing the process too. Such an important part of it, and for people to see the detail in it is also very important to see the craftsmanship that goes into one of your pieces. So people can see and purchase this art on brucejacobson.art.com, I think .art, brucejacobson.art, and see your work there and purchase it there. You're also on Facebook. You have a few Facebook pages for different types, different parts of your art. Let's see, there's Bruce Jacobson art, and then Spirit Wood is the other piece, which we're going into the jewelry piece. I think Spirit Wood is the jewelry part of your artwork.
Correct.
And you can purchase it there and view it on Facebook. But then also you have it for sale at the Minnesota Street Market, where you can purchase Spirit Wood there also. So as we transition into the jewelry portion of your art, is there anything you want to share before we start looking at the work?
Yeah, so the jewelry portion is really different both in process and in final product. Whereas the fine art is uh, more about capturing the subject and capturing motion. The jewelry is actually, and I chose the name Spirit Wood after a lot of kind of contemplation and trying to figure out what really captures what we do here. And the theological part of my brain is really fascinated by how humanity touches the spiritual. And wood has a long history of being something that will create mythology about wood. We'll create mystical creatures that inhabit wood. And we have a real connection. It's functional to us. It's beautiful. It smells. It has a tactileness to it. And so we interact with wood in so many ways. Um, but it's even deeper than what a scientist would think of. Um, that it evokes responses of memory, of hope. In some cases, some woods are associated with yeah, how I'm trying to think of various stories, but even things we fear. And so, depending on which type of wood, we connect to it in different ways. And so, when I am creating a piece that is a jewelry piece, that is a much more personal interaction um, than it would be with kind of my fine art pieces. And not that the fine art pieces aren't intended to tap into people's personal experience, but the jewelry is something that you wear, something that you touch. I think my wife taught me this great lesson because she's a pendant caresser. she will find that in times of stress that her hand will just go and kind of touch base with a pendant. And so here, when I'm, applying that same level of finish so that the piece has that level of smoothness, it's for that physical interaction, so that we can achieve that same thing.
Oh, wonderful. Let's see some pieces now. Um, some of the jewelry. Here we go. First one. Here we go.
Yeah, so earrings are fun for me, although they may be frustrating for people who go to the website and try to buy them, because I am truly whimsical when I am producing earrings. And so shape and wood and each one is very individual. The this is a very rare and expensive wood called tulip wood, and it is yellow with these reddish stripes. It's a very hard wood. It comes from South America. It's actually a true rosewood, um, and it's it's just fun for me to see where the grain pattern will take me. And so what we will end up with is, it's not that I have five different shapes, available in 20 different woods kind of thing. You'll have some standards, but in general, you're going to just see great variety, and people will spend as much time shopping and trying to decide, because there is that variety, and every piece is simply individualistic.
All right. Let's see the next piece.
So this is a pendant, which is, it's a fairly standard shape that one will see. The crescent moon has a lot of symbolism involved in it. It's a very female symbol, because the phases of the moon are very connected to the female cycle. So this is a pendant that evokes that sense of um, monthly rebirth and that potential for the future. This wood is called zebra wood, which makes for very striking pieces. It's an African wood, has a very distinct brown and nearly black grain pattern, and it's a wood I love working with, because the grain is always dramatic. It's always got something new to offer.
All right. Wonderful. This another piece. Now we have time for probably one more piece of jewelry, and then I want to get to the image of the all the different types of woods. Also, I think that's an important
Sure.
one to close with. So if we could talk about
Yeah.
this one, and then we'll
Yep. Real briefly, so I will occasionally make statement pieces, and this is an example of really stretching myself to include a crystal in a statement piece. This is a piece of rosewood, and the shape in my statement pieces, the shape will always be driven by the grain. So the wood itself is controlling the shape and what I create. And this one came out to be asymmetric. And so everything about this particular necklace, and it's a very bold piece. It's one that may never sell, or I may someday find exactly the right person who says, that has just got to be me. Um, but it's asymmetric in the chain attachment and all of those things. There's also a very strong piece. Rosewood is symbolic of strength, as is, and I'm gonna forget because I'm getting to that age. I'm forgetting what the stone is in the middle, but it's also a crystal that is associated with strength. So this is very much a very powerful image evoking piece.
I agree. Somebody very strong should have this, or maybe someone that needs strength. Should have this
Yeah,
piece.
yeah. Well, I do put a little trick in a lot of my statement pieces as well, which is a hidden piece, a hidden place behind the piece of jewelry, which is an indentation. And again, it came from my wife, that this, and if you remember worry stones,
Sure.
just kind of having a secret comfort place. So this is a board I created. These are actually pendants. The pendant is called Unfinished Obelisk. The obelisk is a symbol of accomplishment, and of course, one of the most famous one is Washington's monument. But you also find them in ancient Egypt, and they were created from a single piece of stone to celebrate human achievement. These are called unfinished obelisks. They don't have the point at the top. And really, it's a reminder that our lives are not finished. We are being reborn every morning. We are reborn to new life, to new possibilities. And that is so that's kind of the story behind this shape. It actually pairs really well with that crescent, and I make a piece that combines with that crescent. Um, but this is not all, but many of the different types of wood that I have available. That any piece can be made basically in any wood. And they come from all over the world, some from Africa, South America, but they also come from my own backyard. So there is plum tree and cherry and lilac from my backyard. There's ash wood that's from, well, was my dad's farm. It's now my farm. He's fully retired and has now moved to Arizona. Um, so uh, it's really, this is a chance for me to share the beauty and the variety of wood that are available in the world.
Mhm. Yes, thank you very much. The wonderful piece about these interviews that I hope the audience today will see also is the message and the meaning and the connection with your artwork. That is something I've looked at your pieces. I've visited the Minnesota Street Market to see your work many times. I think my mom purchased a piece for me of your work too, and to know the spiritual connection to it and the craftsmanship and the choice of the wood is such an important part. And that story is very important when people go to purchase your work and look at your pieces and just pick out the right piece, and how picking out that piece is just as important as buying something. Um, and
Yep.
so they can go to your website, Bruce Jacobson Art. They can check out your two Facebook pages to find your work there, and also visit the Minnesota Street Market. Is there anything you'd like to share before we close our conversation today, Bruce?
You talk about the spiritual aspect, and people often say, "Oh, which one, right? What wood is right for me?"
Mhm.
And I refuse to give an answer. The wood has to speak to you. In so touch the pieces, look at the grain. The wood carries the story of the tree from which it came. A tree captures its life in its wood and its grain. And that interaction is not something I can control. That is something that is very personal between the person who owns the piece and wears it, and the piece itself.
Mhm. Yes, thank you so much, Bruce. Thank you for being with us today, and support your local artists and visit Bruce Jacobson's website, and you can visit the Minnesota Street Market for his work there also. Thank you again, Bruce. Have a good day.
Yeah. Thanks again, Alicia.